Good evening and welcome to the Finance and Capital Management Committee meeting. I am Barbara Sykes, the chair of the Finance and Capital Management Committee. Joining us today is the co-chair, Member Harrison, and our third member of the committee, Dr. Molinar, cannot make it today and asks that she be excused. So we're going to start right off with our previous minutes, and I would ask that we approve our previous minutes. Member Harrison.
So moved.
And I will second that. So the previous minutes from our meeting of January 23rd.
November.
Was January 23rd? November 19th. November 19th have been approved. We will go right into the presentation from our treasurer, Dr. Thompson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Member Pastor Harrison. So today, there are a few things that are really everything shared today is critical and at a critical point in the state of Ohio in terms of funding for schools and all the things that we see moving. And you'll see that I've combined a 5-year forecast and a voucher presentation together because they're symbiotic, unfortunately, tied together, and we don't know where that third year, additionally, of the Fair School Funding Act will lead us. So I don't have a lot of information on that yet, but there's some, I think, critical information that our committee and the community needs to understand as it relates to vouchers. And then under new business, you'll also see 2 items that we will seek board approval coming up next week. So running it through the committee, as I understand that's our current process.
Thank you, Dr. Thompson.
So kind of just a refresher, we're going to look at those insights into the Akron Public Schools 5-year forecast. We'll look at our revenue, our trends, our expenditure projections. What does our cash balance look like? And how does the voucher program impact all of this? So one of the first things to take a look at as you're looking at this slide is the orange is showing us our expenditures, which you can see are rising, which is no surprise. That very difficult for that not to project up. It's virtually impossible for it not to project up. The rate at which it does, that's a different argument. But you can see that starting in 26, we're going to start moving out back into deficit spending, even with the passage of our levy. You can see our cash balances from 24 to 29 start to decline fairly rapidly. They level off in 25, 26 with revenue from our levy proceeds. That does also include the bond issue, but I'll address that later. But you can see where we do stay in the black through 2029, but you can see that we're eating into our cash reserves every single year from 25 on.
Yes.
Personnel costs are a big piece of our expenses. They're actually end up being about 83% of. And that's not uncommon. That's very common in public schools. We are a service industry, obviously. And those numbers will, with negotiations that comes up, becomes a little more difficult to project moving forward. But this is where we think we are at this point. So it's a combination of additional positions, a combination of increases and just expenditures to pay for our contracts as well. So you'll all remember this. This is our current submitted 5-year forecast. it assumes, of course, that the levy is passed. It's included. That if you remember, we realized late in the year that we'd received some additional funding from public utilities. That's in there. It also shows the delays in capital projects. Delays in capital projects really kind of only will inflate 1 or 2 years and then come back. So they don't really have a big impact on a 5-year forecast unless you can delay them outside of a 5-year forecast. And then this also is, all these numbers are predicated on $10 million in reductions with no increases, obviously, in additional expenditures, and those begin in January. So when you take a look at that, you can see we expect to end fiscal year 25 with about $86 million, and by the time we hit 29, we're down to about $16.5 million in cash reserves. So some of our challenges that we're seeing are slower growth in revenue. Our projected increases typically are historically been about almost 2%, and we're seeing them at just a little over 0.25%. That's what we're projecting based on what we know at this point. Obviously, we have rising costs. The biggest drivers are our personnel and benefits. We project $36.8 million shortfall by fiscal year 29, meaning, still remember, $16 million in cash reserves, but we will eat into it that year close to $37 million. So we're projecting 29 to spend more, obviously, than we're taking in at the rate of $36.8 million is our current projections. So in order to balance that out, we would have to increase revenue or a combination of increasing revenue and reduction in expenditures of about 9.5% of our total budget. So that's a pretty big number. That's about $50 million.
Yeah, that's a big number.
It's a big number. So some of the recommendations that we feel like are important from the finance side of the house is prioritize efficiency and optimize those high-cost areas. So taking a hard look at all the areas that we spend, what's our top priorities and what aren't. And those are difficult conversations. They happen outside of the finance department. We make recommendations, but those decisions ultimately are made in the superintendent's office. But it is our job to help keep him informed and give him recommendations, and we do that. Revenue enhancement, we know what that typically means is a levy, which we just passed, but there are other avenues as well, and I know that we work very hard to pursue those avenues across the board. Strategic planning, we have to make sure that we have some long-term strategies that are effective in making sure that we keep, to the extent that we possibly can, keep those revenues and expenditures aligned. Now, in public education, it's because of House Bill 920, freezing revenue in perpetuity, that becomes impossible at some point or another. So all schools I've ever known go into deficit spending, but how far and how quickly are the answers? That's where the rubber meets the road. And we would also recommend and initiate a hiring and creation of new positions freeze. And when positions come open, some of them have to be filled and some of them don't. So taking a critical look at those, I'm not suggesting for a second that we have people that aren't doing work and aren't enhancing the direction we're trying to move the district. But again, when you're in the position that we're in, we need to take a hard look at those every time they come open and have a serious discussion about, can that position continue, does it need to continue, or can it be permanently terminated or riffed, or can it just go unfilled for a certain period of time? So in conclusion, we have a lot of financial challenges. They're due to those declining cash reserves and rising deficits. Those proactive fiscal strategies are really, truly essential to us being able to stay in a healthy position and sustain the services that are most critical for our students and the community. So how does that, we're going to flow into now vouchers. How does vouchers have anything to do with this? And it's pretty shocking how extensive the vouchers program does impact us and could impact us even more than we even currently know or understand. So the Ohio Schools Voucher Program, it's state-funded scholarships for students to attend private or charter schools. That's what it's for. And those dollars come at the expense of funding that was originally appropriated for public schools. And I think that's really critical. This is not an extra pot of cash that they're dipping into. This is funds that were earmarked for public education, which are now being redirected towards private and charter school tuition. Some of the key programs that this goes into are the Ed Choice Scholarship Program, and those are for students in underperforming or low-income households. But what's important to note, especially on the low-income housing part, we are now so high over the poverty line, 450% over the poverty line, that nearly 80% of all people in the state of Ohio are eligible for vouchers. Yep. So we're talking about people that never expected to receive additional supports and from the state, and have historically sent their children to private or charter schools, who are now receiving, as you can see, amounts up to $5,500 for K-8 students and up to $7,500 for high school students. We're talking about taking dollars that the local citizens voted to be earmarked for APS, yet being redirected to other places. Another one is the Autism and John Peterson's Special Needs Scholarships, and those are for students with disabilities to attend private education or other services. So again, we're redirecting state funding from public schools, and that is deeply contributing to our challenges. Now remember, 5 years out, we're looking at deficit spending of about $37 million. Keep that number in mind as we move forward. Increased participation is only going to further strain budgets. That number is just going to, there's no cap on it.
I know.
Just keeps growing and growing and growing exponentially. And which means reductions for public schools. And you know, a key difference also is you take a district like the city of Akron and you compare it to some other wealthier districts. The wealthier districts are hit far less by this than we are, because most of their funding is local. So they're not seeing those reductions. So remember, I said 37 million. Look at that. 26 million we're losing in funding right now as a result of the voucher program.
Yeah.
Add that up, and that doesn't even include busing and some other issues. So the number is probably over 30 million, but I wanted to stay conservative in what I could actually mathematically show. And there are currently 3,161 Akron Public Schools students who are residents. They're student age, they're residents in our city, and they use those dollars to attend charter or private schools, with the vast majority of those 3,000 students have never stepped foot in Akron Public Schools. So there were people that left, many of which are well above poverty, but they're taking those dollars, redirecting them from the state into the coffers of charters and private schools. So additional expansion and financial impacts of the programs have tripled in funding $387 million in public funds to private schools in fiscal year 24, just as a result of the expansion program. We're not talking about vouchers yet.
Yeah.
Vouchers, look at that number. Almost $1 billion was spent on private school vouchers in 23 and 24, with 95% of those kids already attending private schools.
Mm-hmm.
The stated intention of this program is clearly not happening. It's clearly not happening. Budgetary constraints caused by these redirected funds have led to programming cuts in Akron and in other places. We've seen it. We're experiencing it now. We had $26 million more this year in funding. We wouldn't be having some of the difficult discussions that we've all had. We wouldn't have them. We wouldn't need to have them. We could continue to do everything possible for our kids. And now we're at very difficult conversations of, well, what are we going to keep? What are we not going to keep? What are we going to fix? What are we not going to fix? What can we push down the road? And all of those things just create problems for the administration and boards down the road. So recommendations to mitigate some of these voucher impacts. We obviously need, and I know that this, Madam Chair and Pastor Harrison are well informed and deeply involved in this, but we need to communicate the financial impact of the voucher programs to our public, but also to our policymakers that will at least listen, the ones that will. We need to advocate for equitable funding reforms that are fair. We thought we had it in the School Fair Funding Act, and now year 3. Again, I'll report back hopefully by next month with some relative idea of what that might look like, but it would be devastating if those, depending on how deeply they cut year 3 of that already agreed upon amount.
Yeah.
Community outreach, and we've put a lot of effort and have done pretty well recently in this endeavor, but we need to attract and retain the students in our district, and we've made concerted efforts to do so and have made some gains in that area. Highlight the quality, value, and extraordinary educational options that exist in this school district. This is my 4th school district as an administrator over 29 years, and the programs that we have are unprecedented. We have incredible programs and opportunities for students across the board, early college, high school, STEM schools, incredible career tech programs. There are so many opportunities for our kids. And again, we need to do, and we are working very hard to do it, but marketing that so that people understand we're more than just a couple of bad headlines. There's a lot more to our school district than that. Mm-hmm. So some of the recommendations to mitigate continued is collaborate with other districts and see how we could share strategies and resources with other districts. Strengthen our collective efforts to address adverse effects of the expansion programs, and that's really pretty much maintaining our student population to the extent that we possibly can. And so those are some pretty significant impacts that we're facing. I'm going to do a 5-year forecast update midway, so that we stay more on top of it, so we don't find ourselves in a position where, to the extent that we can, the rug's not pulled out from underneath us. And that's really closely monitoring it, and closely what's monitoring in Columbus is critical. And we're just going to have to advocate, fight, and then see how the chips fall and then move from that point forward. We definitely need to really watch our budget, maintain the cuts that we have said we're going to make, and and hold our expenditures as low as we possibly can.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Thompson. Member Harrison, do you have questions, comments?
Dr. Thompson, and for the public as a whole, when we look at the amount of money that we're losing and the 3,000 kids, let's say 3,200 kids that we don't have, conventional wisdom would be to say to scale back services. And I think, for the general public, I just want all of us to be mindful that we built these schools for a purpose and for a number of kids. And we can't scale back because we still have to maintain the buildings. We still have to maintain classrooms. We still have to maintain the learning environment. So to think that we can just scale back because we don't have that many kids is not easily done.
No.
And so if at some point we can just kind of go over, and not this meeting, but if we can go over what it really takes, and maybe it's served in instructional policy, but I think I would just really like the public to know what it takes to run a school district and what it takes to build. If we take something away, eventually we'll have to build it back when we bring kids back. Mm-hmm. And it's a lot more expensive to build it back than to keep it or maintain it. So it wasn't a question, it was just a comment when we look at the numbers, and the conventional wisdom is say to scale back, but I think we've scaled back as much as we can and maintain a quality education for our kids.
Thank you, Member Harrison. Let me just ask you, Dr. Thompson, under the Fair Finance Plan, what was the amount that Akron is scheduled, that you projected from what was understood, that Akron is projected to receive under the Fair Finance Plan for this third year?
Nearly $18 million.
$18 million.
So depending on how much of that's at stake.
Mm-hmm. So that would just simply add to our bottom line of deficit if we don't receive any of that, because you have factored all of that $18 million in.
Of course.
All of that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And when you factor that in, does that how does that deal with our funds that we try to make sure that we keep on hand?
Our 2 months of cash
2 months
reserve?
of cash, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, if you take a look at the 5-year forecast, you go back and look at the slide that just shows the numbers with the yellow line underneath it. Mm-hmm. Board policy is that we maintain at least 2 months of unencumbered cash reserves on hand at all times. That's about $63 million.
Right.
So when you see a number that's less than $60 million, which is just a couple of years out, mm-hmm. then you see that at that point, we need to trigger more revenue, which would be very difficult to do. Mm-hmm. And the second part would be to cut more expenditures. And as Pastor Harrison noted just a minute ago, mm-hmm. we have students that need our support and need educational resources, and those are not going down in cost, they're rising in cost. Healthcare rising exponentially in cost, and so that makes it, I'm sorry, that's me, I'm sorry. So that makes it really, really challenging to deal with that issue. So again, we're going to have to watch it very closely and see exactly what those, what's going to be that next biennial budget and what's it going to include. Yeah,
and that process is starting right now. And of course, with the opinion of the new Speaker of the House, it is not really looking that good for what will happen with vouchers as it relates to the monies that will still come out of our various districts. The other thing is that I did attend the meeting on Vouchers Hurt Ohio, and unfortunately most of the conversation was in executive session because this was with the attorney that was going over the strategy for the lawsuit. The judge, we were actually scheduled, the lawsuit was scheduled to start in November of last year, but the judge made a determination that she needed more time to deal with the various items that had been filed before the court before she could rule on that. So now it looks like the first meeting will probably be in April, the first court hearing, and that will be looking at those items that she will keep in, those items that she will take out from the filing. But it is we are finding ourselves in a very difficult situation. I guess the good news is that from the news items that came out as it related to what the speaker's thought processes were feeling that it was unsustainable to continue to fund public schools at the rate that has been agreed upon, that he did get quite a bit of conversation from schools across the district that indicated that, this is what we agreed upon, and from some legislators from both sides of the aisle that indicated that it's just not fair. The fair funding reduction to not fairly fund us as you agreed to is just not fair. So hopefully that is giving him some pause, and I think that it is, but not much. So I absolutely agree with you that it is important that we advocate, that we are in constant contact with our legislators on both sides of the aisle to talk about this issue and to try and make sure that we keep as much money as possible in our system. And we know that our citizens here in Akron support monies going to the public school system. That's why they just voted for the levy. They understood that money is to go to the public school system. I will tell you one of the filings that was made that the other side is asking that the court consider levies in making a decision. And supposedly we're supposed to be just overwhelmingly with money because of the local levies that's been passed, which we know is not correct. Thank you for your presentation. Thank you for keeping this in front of us, because we have to keep this in front of mind to understand where we are, where we're going, and what we have to stay on top of this. It is very disturbing to think that we have over 3,000 students that could be coming to this district, but have chosen to go to charter or private schools. And I know it, as you said, it is not because of the services that we provide. I agree with you. I think that we are providing more than adequate services, more than adequate learning and opportunities for our students. But the voucher system is getting easier and easier for individuals to choose not to come to the public school system, unfortunately. So if there's nothing else, we will move on to the next agenda item, which is our December monthly finance report.
So what I've tried to do, so it's spinning to open right now so the community can see the actual report, hopefully. Mm-hmm. But I've tried to create there we go. At least it's on mine, but it's not showing up there. No, okay. What I've tried to create is a document that kind of breaks it down into categories to make it a little bit easier to really understand and digest. So this is a new way, so I'll be looking for some feedback as to whether or not this is helpful or not. But so what we're looking at now is a snapshot of actuals for us part of the fiscal year. right? So about halfway through the fiscal year. So year-to-date revenue through December of 2024 is about $172.47 million, which is about roughly 1.2% increase from 23. And remember, what we have seen historically has been 1.99%, so that's below what we've seen historically. Some of the key drivers for that are higher real estate taxes, and that was because of the value increase. And then, and of course, our recently passed levy, an increase in unrestricted state aid of about $2.61 million. So that's good that revenue is increasing, and our revenue collections rose by $3.09 million compared to December of 2023. And the major contributions for that were we did take, which we've passed at our last meeting, a payment in lieu of, so receiving some tax dollars early, so that skews that quite a bit. And then other miscellaneous revenue sources that were fairly small and inconsequential. Our revenue forecast, the total annual revenue forecast was $366.84 million, and we are projecting at this point to surpass that by $2.1 million to the good. So that's a variance of roughly 0.5%.
Yeah.
Expenditures on the other side are year-to-date expenditures. Total expenditures through December are $187.39 million, which is 6.5% higher than 23. And some of the key factors there are textbooks at $5.08 million and general supplies increasing more than anticipated. Monthly expenditures in December 24 rose by $150,000 compared to December of 23, which we obviously knew would occur. Some of the notable variances, miscellaneous expenses, and building-related costs. So expenditures for the future, total annual expenditures projected are projected at $390.33 million. That exceeds our forecast by $5.47 million, or a 1.4% variance in what was originally projected. Cash flow, year-end cash balance is estimated balance for June of 25 at $83.09 million. That's a decline from June of 24, which was $106.58 million. We knew we were in deficit spending, and this is exactly what it illustrates. That impact, the variance impact, the revenue trend is favorable, as we said it previously, by $2.1 million, but the expenditure variance and trend is unfavorable by $5.47 million over what we projected. So the net result in that is we have a cash flow decline.
Yeah.
So investments, though, are helping offset that to some extent. Our investments are still doing well. Our general fund yield is 3.66%. Our fourth quarter earnings in 24 netted us an income of $537,000 for that quarter, which is really solid. And that goes into our general fund. Our projected 2025 gross income is nearly $2 million. So that helps us out, offset some of our deficit. So our portfolio highlights yields across all those portfolios, all four of our portfolios, ranges from 4.32% to 4.89%. So we're still doing well in the marketplace. Our total projected gross income for 25 is approximately $3 million. And we're using our investment strategy is to focus on short to mid-term maturities and maintain liquidity for our spending needs. So, we often have to make sure, we invest as much as we can, but we need to be able to quickly access that cash to pay our bills.
Yeah.
So the economic outlook, the Federal Reserve slowed the rate cuts with 2 reductions expected in 2025, or at least that's what we're being told at this point. Inflation still is persistent, limiting further rate adjustments. So the feds are slowing down because of that reason. And then elevated yields anticipated to continue throughout the year. So in summary, Our financial position reflects modest revenue growth offset by rising expenditures and declining cash balances. Again, not new news for us. Investments are structured to leverage high yields while ensuring liquidity for upcoming obligations, bills, paying to run our district. And strategic planning will be crucial in addressing financial challenges in 25 and beyond. And I think that does not come as new news.
All right. Thank you, Member Harrison. Dr. Thompson, so with the investment, great job with the investments. But as you said, you have to consider the short-term investment and the maturity in order to pay a bit. What is short-term for you? How many months?
Short-term could be something as short as 6 months.
Days, 6 months.
Yeah. Or even less.
Less, that's what I was
even
thinking.
less. So we use Star Ohio for a lot of those short-term investments, so that we can pull that out today. We made a transfer today just to make sure we had the cash on hand that we needed. So it's a pretty simple process. Yeah. Some of our more long-term investments would be with our bond dollars, for example.
Right.
We have to watch those because of arbitrage, because the state will only allow us to earn so much off of a bond issue,
yes,
or COPS. So those are important to watch. But like for example, that $15 million that we transferred over. We've already invested that. That's more short term because we're going to need to start drawing off of that, and we'll talk about that on the board resolutions that are upcoming. But
thank you, Dr. Thompson. Under the textbook expenses, so that's $5.8 million, and the supply. So both of these line items were more than anticipated.
Well, the
textbooks and the general supplies?
The textbook, it throws off the 5-year forecast to some degree because it wasn't anticipated that one of our adoptions would have occurred in this fiscal year. But it didn't get in and didn't get into the books until this fiscal year. So while that helped support a previous fiscal year, now it's time, and now we're paying because it wasn't projected out. Overall, it's fairly inconsequential overall. It just shifts that burden from one fiscal year to the next.
But doesn't it continue to shift to one fiscal year to the next?
No.
Okay.
It's just a one-time thing.
It's just a one-time thing.
Yeah. So as we're looking at adoptions, and Angela could speak much more intelligently onto those adoptions that are upcoming, but I'm sure, I think we have a K-2 adoption coming. Is that what?
We probably talked about the paper, but yeah, it's probably time for us to start looking at our adoption for elementary, but we just adopted our ELA.
And just for the public, could you just explain adoption? That's a term that's kind of not
Yeah, so adoption means each I think it's like 3 to 5 years we adopt a new curriculum.
Okay.
So adopting a new curriculum. So we just adopted a new curriculum, I want to say like 2021 for ELA for K-12. We just adopted the math, the science. I think what took us into this was our arts and letters adoption.
Okay. So in other words, what we're trying to do is make sure that we keep our children where they need to be and being able to move along
Stay
and to
relevant.
stay relevant,
Yes.
and significant in this whole process, as well as pass our standard tests.
Yeah.
So we have to keep increasing because the world is constantly changing. So you're constantly adopting new curriculums in order to help out, make sure that our children are where they need to be. That's what we're talking about.
There's no state mandate that requires it, but if you don't do it, as Angela mentioned, Ms. Carter mentioned, if we don't do that, we can end up teaching something that's not tested, or something gets tested, vice versa, and really put our kids at a significant disadvantage.
Right.
So it is a textbooks, whether they're actual real textbooks you touch, or they're on the computer. They get you either way.
Right.
The textbooks companies have figured that one out,
Yeah.
and you pay for it either way, through the rights or through the purchase of a hard
Right.
textbook.
Pastor Harris.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If you know, or Ms. Carter, what is the life of a curriculum?
Yeah, I would have to call up a friend.
Oh, okay.
Phone a friend.
Yeah.
Call Dr. Caver.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, but I can get the answer to that for you.
Yeah.
Okay.
But the answer is probably, it depends.
Yeah. That's,
If you remember, I mean, we
depends.
changed all of the curriculum. Really, what was that, in like 2014 or 15? It drastically changed. So, you know, it varies for sure. Varies for sure.
what's happening,
And
yeah.
some things don't change. But even the way we teach math, you would think, well, math is math is math. Well, that is true, but the way in which it's taught isn't the same, and what is tested isn't the same.
Yeah, so the good news is that we're staying relevant and we're staying current. The bad news is that it's costly.
Yeah, it's expensive.
We look at it every 3 to 5 years to see, and determine whether or not we're going to adopt the curriculum. But I don't know if there's research or best practices.
Yeah.
So I am checking in on that.
Yeah, okay.
what you just gave me
Yes.
was good enough. Okay, yeah, I was just trying to get a mindset of
Yeah.
where it is. But looking at it every 3 to 5 years is appropriate.
And I think that's just important for our parents that may be listening to know that the school system is looking at it every 3 to 5 years and making sure that we stay current. But also, as we talk about why we need levies, why we need additional money, why we need monies to stay in our system. You know, we can say we're all about the kids, we're all for the kids, but if we don't have the money, the resource to get the resources, to get the things that we need to keep our children where they need to be,
Very true.
you know, we need the money. We absolutely need the money in order to be supportive of our supportive staff and staff. Dr. Carter, Mrs. Carter.
You're trying to force me to go back to school.
Yeah, Dr. Carter. Always, you know.
So Dr. Caver did respond, and so we have changed where now we're looking at 6 to 8 years with
Oh.
curriculum adoption.
Okay.
And so I think it's because curriculum has gotten better with making sure they're in alignment with our Common Core standards. And I think it helps, too, with the budget.
Great. Yes, it does. If we don't have to change it instead of 3 to 5 years, 6 to 8 years, that will help with the budget.
And Dr. Caver gets an attaboy for being on that so quickly.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Caver.
Yes, thank you. Okay,
Ready?
yes.
So the next section is the board members' event information. And it's popping up for me, but it's not showing for you, and I apologize. I'm not sure why that is the case.
Okay.
Can you take a quick look? It could be user error. What a shocker.
For sure, huh? Thank you, sir.
You have to go out of it.
Yeah. Okay,
Okay.
that's good.
So you can see the calendar. Obviously, they are sent to each of our board members, but you can see the community. This gives the community an opportunity to see just how busy board members are and how little you're compensated for the amount of time that's invested. Needless to say, the stress that it can be at times.
Yeah, and I would just note at this moment that a number of the board members are attending one of the trainings tonight, that starts at 5:30. So I'm sure they're there en route there to deal with a training that's covering. What is it covering? Negotiations.
Negotiations.
Yes, I'm looking when I'm not seeing negotiations. Yes, so thank you. I have no questions on that. Do you, Doctor?
No, I don't.
Pastor Harrison? Okay. Okay, on
Go to there. And yeah, that's fine. Oh, fast forward. Thank you.
New or it just.
Perfect. That's okay. That's okay. Thank you.
good.
So under unfinished business,
Yes,
I don't know.
yes.
I don't know that, do you have anything that you want to?
Nope, have nothing that I want to bring on unfinished business. We can move on to new business.
Yeah, so new business are a couple of items that will appear on the board agenda. So taking it through our committee to hopefully mitigate concerns about it. But what is the purpose of passing a resolution for bond retirement fund appropriations, which is one of the things that we'll be asking for. The Ohio Public School Board may pass a resolution seeking approval of bond retirement fund appropriations for some very specific purposes. Probably most importantly is for our debt repayment authorization. So we need the board to approve this so that we can use those dollars to finance our capital projects, which include new buildings, obviously, is one of the things that we're working towards. The North High School one is the one that bonds would be going towards. It is also designated to be repaying the principal and interest on these bonds. So to make our mortgage payment, so to speak, we need the board to authorize that as well. And passing a resolution ensures that the board formally approves the allocation of these funds required to meet all of our debt obligations. Secondly, it's in compliance with Ohio law, which mandates that public entities, including school boards, adopt resolutions that deal with managing and budgeting appropriations. And the process ensures transparency, accountability, and adherence to state and financial regulations. Thirdly, transparent financial oversight. The resolution demonstrates that the school board is actively involved in managing its fiscal responsibilities. It creates a clear record, which is also very important, of decisions that were made on the record for the use for taxpayer funds, and in this particular case, repayment of our bond issue, our debt obligation. Alignment with fiscal year budgets. The appropriation for the bond retirement fund must align with our fiscal year budget, and the resolution formalizes these allocations to ensure that those payments are made in a timely fashion, and that also protects our credit rating, just like it does at home.
Yes.
Taxpayer assurances, since bond repayments often rely on property tax, and ours does, the resolution reassures the public that the district is responsibly spending these funds and handling these funds. As I mentioned before, the credit worthiness and fiscal stability are important, so this resolution helps us maintain a strong credit rating. Good credit rating ensures that we can keep our borrowing conditions as positive as possible. We don't know what the future holds. And then failing to meet bond repayment obligations on time obviously harms not only our credit report, but our reputation as a school district. So in summary, we'd be asking you to pass this bond resolution so that we are fiscally responsible, adhere to all legal requirements, that we're transparent and accountable, that we make timely repayments to protect the district's credit worthiness, ensure that timely payments to our bond advisors as well. Baker Tilly, for example, we pay our county auditor fees. They charge for all these things as well. and we make our timely payments on our debt issuance. So this process really underscores the board's commitment to maintaining financial stability while fulfilling our obligations to bondholders in the community.
Thank you, Dr. Thompson. Any question? And I especially want to thank you for bringing these items to us before we actually see those at our full board meeting, so that we have an opportunity to hear the reasoning behind them and to ask any questions should we need those. And hopefully we will be able to continue to do this, to look at the items that's coming to the full board during committee meetings, so that we can hopefully have a better understanding, as well as save time in going through our agenda. So I appreciate you very much bringing that before us.
You're very welcome. And, I think we're all kind of learning our different way of operating. So I think we're catching on.
Yeah, okay.
So the second resolution you'll see is North High School Construction Fund appropriations. That's, again, Ohio public law allows a board to pass a resolution seeking approval for construction fund appropriations for the following purposes. And first and foremost, number one, just legally, to be legally compliant. So Ohio law requires that boards adopt this resolution and establish management appropriations for specific funds, including construction funds, which is what we're talking about. And passing the resolution ensures that we are compliant with financial regulations governing public expenditures. So it's just good business, and it's obviously legal. Funding authorizes for capital projects. There are 3 of them, as you can see, and we're focusing these appropriations are for North High School specifically and only, and it is for construction of a new building. And the resolution formally authorizes the use of those funds for those approved reasons. Transparency and accountability is always vital, and the resolution ensures that the use of public funds for construction purposes is transparent and, again, documented. It provides a financial trail for audits and public accountability. That's very important for us as we're wrapping up our audit. That the district is audited every year, so we need to show that trail as well. Alignment with budgetary planning, that we are appropriating funds to align with our financial resources with its capital improvement plans. So making sure that we can pay for things. And I can tell you that this is going to be challenging moving forward, as we're seeing in construction costs increasing at 16% a year right now, year over year. And so the longer it takes to get to a construction project, which is not near as easy to get there as one might think, and all of a sudden, does your pot of money that you have cover what it's going to cost in construction? So that was a topic of conversation for us in our meeting this morning in the finance department, is how are we going to make sure that we don't find ourselves in a position where we're short on cash to complete these projects. And it ensures that the money is available when needed. So, we can delay construction. You don't pay a contractor and watch how quickly they come out to do the work. Coordination with our funding sources. Those construction projects often involve multiple players, which this district is well versed in. But this is different because we are not doing this through the state or coordinating with the city per se.
Right.
So it makes it a little bit easier. So these are really focusing on the local bond measures, and the resolution coordinates the appropriations of these funds to ensure proper allocation and spending according to what we said we were going to spend it on.
To the resolution passed.
Yes, right. Are you going to spend the dollars on what you said you passed it for? Fiduciary responsibility. The resolution reflects the school board's responsibility to manage public funds prudently and ensures that construction projects are completed within the budget and according to plan. And support for district growth and improvement. And I think all three of those things are really applicable for us as it relates to North High School. We have a growing student population, check. We need to improve safety enhancements, check. And we clearly need to modernize the facilities. And the resolution ensures the district has the resources to meet those critical objectives. So in summary, by passing the resolution for the construction fund appropriations, the board fulfills its legal and fiduciary responsibilities. It allocates funds transparently and effectively for capital projects. It supports the successful planning and execution of construction initiatives that align with the district's long-term educational and infrastructural goals. They're one and the same. Facilities help drive learning, and the need for learning obviously drives the need for facilities to do that in.
Yes. Any questions? Okay, no questions. Again, thank you for bringing this ahead of time and going over this, reviewing this with us before we see it at the full board meeting. We appreciate that. Is there anything else to come before the committee?
Thank you, Madam Chair. If I can just share a conversation that you and I had about school funding. It is not, and this is to the public, it is not that we are opposed to private schools or charter schools. The opposition is public dollars should not leave the public school system. And if I want to take my child to a private school, I should pay for that private school because public dollars were intended for public education. So it's not to demonize any private school or any charter school. We're just saying that the money intended for public schools should stay in the public schools.
Agreed.
Yes. Thank you, Member Harrison. So if there's nothing else to come before the committee, the Finance and Capital Management Committee will adjourn at 5:27.